in general, if you have clay soil, you will not have to water as frequently as you would if you had sandy or loamy or silty soil, particularly sandy soil. So just be aware that you don't want to overwater. The other thing you don't want to do is over fertilize, because if you over fertilize in a clay soil that's already pretty nutrient dense, first of all, that's wasteful. You're spending money you don't need to spend. Secondly, because the density of the soil really not only holds on to moisture, it's going to hold on to salts, it's going to hold on to some of that fertilizer that you put in there that's not necessary, and in the long run that can be detrimental to the health of the plant. Likewise, if you have clay soil, and particularly if you garden in a place like I do, where it gets very, very hot, very dry, and today's weather notwithstanding, later in the summer, we'll be lucky if we see rain for weeks and weeks at a time.
Yeah.
In that case, that dense soil is really going to hold on to some of those things which are toxic. If you have used chemical sprays, if you have used synthetic fertilizers that have lots of salt in them, they're going to hold on to and embrace all of those yucky things that you really want to go ahead and filter through the soil. So how do you fertilize, and how do you know when you need to fertilize? Well, basically by observation, you can look and say, oh, does the plant look happy, or are the leaves yellowing? Does it need some iron? Does it need some fertilizer? What do you use if it needs to be fertilized? Well, typically on organic, you can use an organic granular at the beginning of the season. I think I told you I used Milorganite here. You could use a granular organic, like some kind of espoma product, any kind of granular organic that sometimes comes in a dry pelletized form that you can kind of broadcast. Again, being ever wary that you do not over fertilize, because in the long run, all that does is cause problems, not only for the plants, but also for excessive algae growth and things like that, if there's a lot of runoff and it just goes back into the sewer system. So watch quantities on when you fertilize. You can use a liquid fertilizer, you can use a granular fertilizer, you can, at the point of planting, you could add a little bit of organic fertilizer. Again, espoma is a good product, but I have found there are so many really good small companies now that are producing organic fertilizers that are well balanced, or that are carefully measured to meet the needs of the plant. In other words, if you want something that will produce more blooms, if you want something that's specific to evergreens, those kinds of things. So I don't want to give short shrift to those companies as well. You can find them at your local garden center, you can find them online, you can find them from another number of different places. And then lastly, don't overlook the value of just good old compost. Compost that you make yourself, compost that you buy. You can steep some of that compost in water. It's no more difficult than that, and make compost tea. So anything organic will really, really work. So Stuart, let's see. What have I forgotten in terms of dealing with clay soil? That's basically it. Select the right plants, prepare your planting hole and the planting surfaces well. Make sure that you don't over fertilize, that you don't add anything to the soil that will not be able to leach through, and just overall practice really good horticulture and really good garden hygiene. So there you go. For new gardeners, for experienced gardeners, for gardeners who have been gardening in gardening heaven in loamy soil, and all of a sudden you're gardening in clay, there's some tips that you might want to keep in your back pocket.